Hi and welcome to a CDH Statistics video, deck tech video for Malcolm and Tumna looking into their tournament results. I've made some updates to the CDH Statistics calculations. And I have to say I'm quite happy with the development of this video series. We're using this web page to actually calculate statistics. These are different Malcolm and Tumna deck entries into various tournaments, as you can see here above my head. And what we've done is calculated the wins, loss and draws of all of these decks and reached an average win rate of 24.28% and an average draw rate of 13.77% from a grand total of 56 different decks looked at. And this time also including a p-value to make sure that the statistics calculation is significant, so to say. Now Tumna have an obvious 100% inclusion rate because it's a must-have, you have to play it if you're playing Malcolm Tumna. Therefore it's getting the same win rate and a yellow text. But let's look at something different, for example Gitaxian Probe. Now the big circle pie chart is showcasing the inclusion rate. Suddenly you can see above my head, play it 42 from a total of 56 decks, so every deck isn't playing it. And when we calculate the win rate from only those 42 decks, we get a 23.76. Now this time the text is in red because it's lower than the average, because the average is 24.28. Okay, so actually it's very close to the average, but still lower. However, when the win rate is better than the average, you're getting a green text on the win rate. So for example, Ad Nauseam, not played by everyone, only played by 49 of the 56 decks. So therefore, looking at the win rate of only Ad Naus, or only decks that contained Ad Naus, we're getting that win rate. So with this we can start to try to figure out good cards that you should play inside Malcolm and Tumna, cards that have been proven to work out according to statistics. Except one little detail, the result is not statistically significant. You see, the sample size is actually quite low. However, if you actually look at this, the inclusion rate is quite high. So why is the p-value showcasing a not statistic significant value? When the p-value is saying result is not statistically significant, you can't trust the win rate. Okay, I'm not gonna go into depth and explain the p-value, but in super short, if the collection of the sample size is very spread out, like if you have a very low win and a very high win, and you have these two groups being very large but they're very different from each other, then you can't have a secured result. When the groups are closer to each other, that's when you're getting a more significant p-value. Now, if someone can actually explain that better, feel free in the comments below of the video. But in the end, the sample size of 56 decks is still quite low. So a big takeaway from this video is that we're looking at a prototype, so to say. We're looking at maybe Ad Naus could be a good card. But if we look, for example, at Elesh Norn Grand Genobite, we have two decks that actually played it. The result is significant, but there's only two decks. However, the two decks that actually played Elesh Norn had a very low successful result. They didn't perform quite well. This means that as both of the sample size had a very similar output result, they're getting a significant, statistical significant p-value here. While in the case of Ad Naus, you're getting a spread. You have decks that are losing every single game, and then you have decks that are winning every single game. Except that you have a little bit more win compared to the losses, but still you have a very big spread. Now let's begin by looking at auto-includes. This time the result is statistically significant looking at all decks together. Every one of those 56 decks are playing Phasas, they are playing Tainted Pact, and they're playing Console. Every single deck is playing Ancient Tomb, Lotus Petal, Mystical Tutor, Force of Will, Grand Abolisher and Rhystic Study. They are all also, every one of them playing Jeweled Lotus, because Jeweled Lotus equals turn 1 Malcolm. Looking at cards that have a positive win rate, cards that are performing better than the average group, also having a good statistic significant p-value, we have cards like Swords to Plowshare, Swan Song, Wishclaw Talisman. This actually surprises me a tiny bit, because normally Wishclaw Talisman is great when you have a Dockside. Now this is not including the color identity of red, so we can't play Dockside. However, I guess more tutors is good still. Talisman of Dominance, I mean, every single deck were including Ancient Tomb, so if you have your Ancient Tomb and Talisman of Dominance in your opening hand, that's a good start. Morphic Pool is showcasing to be a good consideration, a good land for this deck. Now, Mox Amber is actually not having a statistically significant p-value, but it's very close. But also, I kinda wanna showcase that a lot of people are actually playing it. You see, when the inclusion rate is very high, that's also indicating that it seems to be a good card. And personally, I think this card should have a pretty good win rate. So even though the p-value isn't indicating that this is a secured result, a win rate we can trust, I personally still believe it. Mox Opal, on the other hand, is showcasing a significant p-value and a very good average win rate. Pact of Negation seems to be legit. Phantasmal Image, now I should actually say that this is a very close average win rate compared to the average. The average is 24.28, while the win rate on Phantasmal Image is 24.89. So it's pretty much identical to the average, but still, it is showcasing a good result. Mnemonic Betrayal is not showcasing a statistically significant p-value. However, it is super close, so I think if you just have a few more decks, we might get an accurate p-value, and I believe the statistics here, it is showcasing an amazing 26.24 average win rate. When you're playing CDH, you're usually going to wheel, you're usually going to fill your graveyard. A lot of your opponents are playing Breach, they're gonna be filling your graveyard, and then with Mnemonic Betrayal you steal all of their cards and you can perform a win con from their cards. I have seen good results from Mnemonic Betrayal looking at statistics like this before, so I believe the results I'm seeing. Also, it has an 78.6 average inclusion rate percentage, so a lot of decks are actually playing it. So to me, this is showcasing and saying that Mnemonic Betrayal is a recommended card for Esper, Malcolm and Tymna. Mental Misstep is showcasing a significant successful p-value and a 25% average win rate, which means it's better than the average. Also, I mean, 96.4 decks are playing it, so it has an amazing inclusion rate. March of the Swirling Mist is showcasing a very good p-value, 24.64 average win rate, which is a micromillimeter better than the average. So it's a good card. This one actually surprises me a tiny bit. We have Laboratory Maniac with a 25% average win rate, and that is better than the average. It also has an 80% inclusion rate among all the 56 different decks. So the verdict is, even though it surprises me, that yeah, Laboratory Maniac seems to be good. You're increasing your combo potential by including a dead 2/2 card for free mana. Grafdigger's Cage is also showcasing a potential. It has a 75% inclusion rate, a very good p-value, win rate 24.88, which means it's tiny bit better than the average, but currently it's a discussion whether Grafdigger's Cage might be the best stacks cards in the game. I don't know, maybe, but it seems to be showcasing a good result. Draenei Magistrate is showcasing a very good result here. So first of all, it is not showcasing an 100% inclusion rate, 90, I'm gonna say 95 on this one, percent inclusion rate, so a lot of decks are playing it, only 3 decks didn't play it, and those decks that did include it have a 25.38% win rate, so it's showcasing some good results. Wow, Dress Down is actually doing really good. So p-value, great, that's a good result on the p-value. 75% win inclusion rate, which means that 42 decks out of 56 included it, and among those decks you have a, I'm gonna say 26 win rate. However, your draw rate did actually go up a tiny bit, but it's not a big difference. The average draw rate among all the 56 decks together are 13.77, while including Dress Down, you got a 14.22% draw rate. That's how often you are getting a draw in one of your games. But yeah, Dress Down is showcasing some really good results. Like, the indication here is that it looks like a very recommended card for you. And I can see that. I mean, I've been playing against Dress Down, and whenever I see it, the worst thing it does is just cycle itself to draw a card. Usually interacts with someone, but it often opens up the window to be able to win the game going through stacks creatures. Force of Negation is having, 24.71% win rate, which is close to the average, but a little bit better. Doomsday is having a very interesting result. So first and foremost, the p-value is not the result is not statistically significant. This means that there's a big spread. So we have a 50-50 split. You have 28 decks out of 56, including Doomsday, which is 50% basically. And inside those 28 decks, you have a lot of decks that are winning very much and a lot of decks that are losing a lot. In other words, Opposition Agent is there, so either you go big or you go very sad. But this means that we can't trust the win rate that is currently sitting on 27.41%. That is a very good win rate, but it's not a win rate we can theoretically trust. But I thought it would be interesting to look at it even though the p-value isn't safe on this one. Diabolic Intent is showcasing a 24.78 average win rate and a secured p-value. Wow. Dark Ritual. So Dark Ritual is sitting on a 25.19 average win rate. Now I want to say that the Malcolm and Tymna win rate here is very close to the average. Now among all the decks, 96.4 decks included it, so there are only 2 decks that didn't play Dark Ritual. So it is showcasing some good results, I think. It seems recommended. I mean, it will help you get your Adnos to resolve. We did look at Adnos. Adnos was showcasing a pretty good win rate, so to say. An Offer You Can't Refuse is sitting on a 24.5 average win rate, an inclusion rate of 89.3%, so a lot of decks were playing it, and the decks that did play it were receiving I'm gonna say pretty much the same, because the average is 24.28, and with An Offer you got 24.5, so it's pretty much identical. So we've looked at a few good cards. Now let's look at some bad apples, cards that are on the lower win rate compared to the average. Daffy Voidwalker is sitting on a 23.53, which is basically very identical to the average, but it's showcasing a tiny bit decrease compared to the other cards. Cyclonic Rift is sitting on a 23, I'm gonna say 24 because it's 23.97%. The p-value is secured. Extremely high inclusion rate, 96.4%, so there were like 2 decks that didn't include Cyclonic Rift, so a lot of decks are actually playing it. I think this is still a card I would actually recommend, because even though the win rate is like tiny bit lower than the average, it still seems to be working fine. You're getting the same kind of win rate compared to what every other Malcolm and Tymna deck are actually getting. Enlightened Tutor, 23.66. which is honestly equal to the average, more or less. Esper Sentinel is sitting on a 24.26, when the average is 24.28. There's 1 deck that didn't include it, and yeah, I'm gonna say that Esper Sentinel is more or less an auto-include. I'm guessing that the 1 deck that didn't play it, maybe just forgot about it or something, I don't know. Play it. Esper Sentinel seems to be doing great. Fierce Guardianship is actually showcasing the exact same result as Esper Sentinel, only 1 deck didn't play it. It is getting a 24% average win rate, which is tiny bit less than the average, but still I'm gonna say that Fierce Guardianship looks like an auto-include. Same thing with Flusterstorm, there were only 2 decks that didn't play it. It's getting a 23.86% average win rate, which is very close to the average total, so yeah, I think this is performing fine. So far we've seen a few cards that are like getting very close to the average win rate. Now we're gonna find some cards that are showcasing a less performance. Mana Drain. Exactly 20% average win rate, 15 decks included it, and has an inclusion rate of 26.8. The p-value is significant, so you can kind of trust the results. And it doesn't seem to be showcasing a good performance. Like 20% compared to 24.28 means that you're like 4.28% lower than the average. Laviniasaurus Renegade is getting a 18.75 average win rate. But now, take a look at this. Look at the draw rate. You have a 17.19% chance of getting a draw compared to the normal in this case, which is 13.77. So your chance of getting a draw is increasing and your win rate is lowered by not guaranteed, but the statistics is indicating that maybe you could get an increased chance of getting a draw and then a lowered chance of getting a win by including Laviniasaurus Renegade. With an inclusion rate of 21.4%, it was played in 12 decks among the 56. In other words, this is not a card we would recommend. Muddle the Mixture. So this is I really like this card personally. I think it's a cool card. It's good when you're not on the call identity of black, because it's a tutor. You can tutor for Underworld Breach, but in this deck's case, Tainted Pact and Thassa's Oracle, so it's great. The p-value is showcasing a significant result. However, the win rate is 21.25, which means that you're getting a lower average win rate, but also an increased draw rate. I'm guessing that you basically have better options than this. You have better tutors like Demonic Tutor, Vamp Tutor, etc. And Muddle the Mixture is actually quite slow and expensive, which means that the chance of getting that fast win is decreased and the turns just getting longer and longer is increased. So in other words, it's not a card, or okay, I'm actually gonna say this. I like Muddle the Mixture and I do recommend it, but if you have a call identity of black, you probably don't need it. On the other hand, like if you're playing on a budget, this is probably a great card. Miscast is not getting a great result. 22.58, an average inclusion rate of 46.4, secured p-value. There might be better counterspells, might be the answer. Wow, Notion Thief. Notion Thief is sitting on a 14.29 average win rate, inclusion rate 26.8, so a lot of decks were playing it, 15 decks total, secured p-value that we can trust, and it's not showcasing a good performance. I guess it's a bit too expensive. Most games where I've seen Notion Thief trying to do some work, you can barely afford it, and when you can, you basically tap out, so it's usually getting killed and you can't protect it with your counterspells because you tapped out. That's my personal observed experience looking at the performance when I see Notion Thief in games. So I do trust the statistics here, like I don't think Notion Thief is showcasing an amazing win rate in general. Serra Ascendant, I'm really happy to see this result because I do think people should start cutting Serra Ascendant from their decks. So this is 1 white mana for a lifelink, 6/6 flying creature. That's crazy. In every other format that would be insane and busted. But in CDH, a 6/6 flying lifelink from the 1 white mana isn't that scary. Now the p-value is significant, so we can trust the results, and it is sitting on a 20.51% win rate. And also the draw rate is actually a little bit higher compared to the average, not that high, it's like 14.53. So you're getting a tiny increased draw rate and a bit of like 4% decrease in win rate by including Serra Ascendant kinda. So a card that is basically just only a creature attacker for Tymna is not recommended still, even though it's punching pretty big. Toxic Deluge. Now this might be more of a meta call. When you look at stacks cards, when you look at certain types of interaction, it is usually coming down to how efficient and how important is that specific card versus your opponents. Take that in mind. So Toxic Deluge is showcasing a secured p-value we can trust with a 12.50% average win rate, an inclusion rate about 20%, 11 decks out of the 56 played it, and nah. The draw rate is actually a little bit lower though, so I guess it is making sure that the game ends, but it's also making sure you're not the one winning the game. I have actually always viewed Tymna and Malcolm as a creature-orientated deck, more mid-range creature-orientated deck, which means that you don't really want to board wipe. You're going a little bit against your own game plan. You want to have Malcolm, you want to have Tymna in play to gain mana and card draw at the same time. Yawgmoth's Will, the black version of Underworld Breach. 24.19% average win rate, secured p-value we can trust. I'm gonna say that this is pretty much equal to the average win rate in general. Very high inclusion rate, something about 68%. 38 decks among the 56 were including it. The draw rate is a little bit higher compared to the average though. I'm actually gonna say that I think I'm going to still recommend Yawgmoth's Will. It is a bit of a slower win con finisher, therefore I do think that the draw rate is a little bit higher. I don't always see Yawgmoth's Will being able to secure a win by resolving it, getting access to your grave, unless your grave is humongous and the game has gone really long. But I do think that the card is, in average, pretty okay. I definitely don't think it's an auto-include, but if anyone actually plays Yawgmoth's Will inside their deck, I wouldn't be too skeptic. Now let's take a look at some deck lists example. Let's take a look at this guy who won a tournament, 6 wins, 1 loss, 0 draws, and 85.71% win rate on that specific tournament, which was Silicon Dynasty, by the way. Here we're playing Aven Mindsetter, Changeling Outcast, Daffy Voidwalker, Draenei, Esper, Grand Abolisher, Laboratory Maniac, even though I'm a skeptic, Thassa's Oracle, Sire Stormtamer. Sire Stormtamer is showcasing an amazing result of 27.78 average win rate and a pretty low draw rate. However, it is showcasing not a significant p-value we can trust, so I'm gonna say that it looks like it's showcasing some potential. Decks that have been performing very well have including it. However, the reason you have a big not significant p-value here is that decks that have performed really bad have also including it. But the indication showcased that Sire Stormtamer could be good. Ranger Captain, Phantasmal Image, Oppo Agent, Demonic Tutor, Doomsday, Mnemonic Betrayal, and Yawgmoth's Will, Adnos, Dark Ritual. But look at this! We're not playing the One Ring, which is something like all decks are more or less including these days. But that is because this is an older deck. As always, link in the description below to this deck list. Now, if you wanna take a look at the most recent deck list, all you need to do is click here and make tournament the highest. This means that you're gonna go by date. So this is the Bonefire, the most recent tournament. We had 2 Malcolm and Tymna entries, and they got 20 and 25 average win rate on their performance. So let's look at this guy who had a 25% average win rate. Doomsday less Tymna Malcolm by Hardish, Teferi, Containment Priest, Archivist of Ogma, Daffy Voidwalker, Displacer Kitten, Draenei, Esper, Grand, Spectral Sailor, Siren Stormtamer, Sarah, Ranger, Orcish, Oppo, Lofo, the new Talion, and Thassas. We're not playing Mnemonic Betrayal, and we are neither playing Yawgmoth's Will. We are playing Adnos though, but we are not playing... No, sorry, here's Dark Ritual. I didn't recognize the shiny Japanese. And here we are playing the One Ring, as well as Necropotence. But just like the name indicated, we are not playing Doomsday. If we go a tiny bit back to this Commander Armageddon 3 with this guy who has a 40% win rate, standing 7, 2 wins, 2 losses and 1 draw. Deck made by Axedgar, I think. Sorry if I mispronounced that. We're not playing Teferi, we're playing Narset instead. Archivist, Aven, Daffy, Draenei, Esper, Fairy, Mastermind, Grand Abolisher, Ranger, Phantasmal, Orcish, the Ranger Captain of Grand Abolisher, Legendary, Malevolent Hermit, Lavinia, Laboratory, Saracen and Stormtamer, Snapcaster Mage, and Thassa's Oracle. Now I recognize the art. We are playing Mnemonic Betrayal, Toxic, but not Yawgmoth's Will, and no Doomsday either. We are playing Adnos and we are playing Dark Ritual. We're actually even playing Deadly Rollick. Deadly Rollick is sitting on a 23.85 average win rate, a draw rate of 12.84. The p-value is not significant, but it's pretty close. 37.5 average inclusion rate, but the spread here is pretty large. You have decks that are winning a lot, and you have decks that are losing a lot playing it. In other words, you can't truly trust the win rate that you're looking at, but I would say that it's close to the average. It's just that it has a 4 CMC value, which would hurt your Adnos. But once again, I mean, your goal is to have your commanders in play, one of them at the very least, so Deadly Rollick should be free to cast in general. And this is in the end something of a mid-range deck kinda too. And we are playing the One Ring. We're actually also playing Smothering Tide. Ooh, and Blind Obedience. The p-value on Blind Obedience is not significant, but it's showcasing a win rate of 24.07, so it's pretty much identical to the average. It's sitting on a 19.6 inclusion rate, so 11 decks out of 56 were playing it. And I think it's showcasing a decent result of doing good. Now we only have, as I said in the beginning of the video, you actually see 59 decks here, but there are some errors on some of the deck lists. But the total grand entry count isn't enormous, which means that there's gonna be a lot of cards that we don't have enough sample size when we're looking at them. Still though, I hope this video brought you some insight about Malcolm and Tymna's average tournament performance, and some cards that could be good to consider, and some cards that might not be that good to consider. But we also looked at some decklist examples by decklists that have entered into tournaments, how in general Malcolm and Tymna kinda looks like among the people that are bringing it to great battle. If you have any suggestions or feedback regarding this video series, feel free to leave that in a comment below, and I will read that and take it into account, as I'm continuously trying to improve this kind of setup. And we are going to look into more and more sample sizes in the future.